kinitesa, nasonga mbele, najua mwanga wanilinda. Nasonga, 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 sitakubali, sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama, sitakubali, sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama, nasonga mbele, 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 mbele. Bele, 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 bele. Kimbia, wasikudanganye, saa yako imepitia. Shikilia hadithi ya ushindi yako, watu hawajasikia. Najua unapambana, ingawa upinzani mekushika mkononi, bado moyo wako warudia. Nasonga, nasonga, nasonga mbele, hata giza kinitesa. Nasonga mbele, najua mwanga wanilinda. Nasonga, 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 sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama, nasonga mbele, 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 mbele. Wajua nasikia siku za usoni wakitaja jina lako pia. Najua unajifunza, ingawa hofu imekushika rohoni, bado moyo wako warudia. Nasonga mbele, hata giza kinitesa. Nasonga mbele, najua mwanga wanilinda. Nasonga, 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 sitakubali kuzama, sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama, sitakubali, sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama, nasonga mbele, nasonga, nasonga mbele, nasonga, nasonga mbele, nasonga mbele, hata giza kinitesa. Nasonga mbele, najua mwanga wanilinda. Nasonga, 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 sitakubali, sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama, sitakubali, sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama, nasonga mbele, nimepitia. Shikilia hadithi ya ushindi yako, watu hawajasikia. Najua unapambana ingawa upinzani mekushika mkononi, bado moyo wako warudia. Nasonga mbele hata giza kinitesa. Nasonga mbele, najua mwanga wanilinda. Nasonga, sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama. Nasonga mbele, wajua nasikia siku za usoni wakitaja jina lako pia. Najua unajifunza ingawa hofu imekushika rohoni, bado moyo wako warudia. Nasonga mbele hata giza kinitesa. Nasonga mbele, najua mwanga wanilinda. Nasonga, sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama. Sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama. Nasonga mbele, nasonga mbele, nasonga mbele hata giza kinitesa. Nasonga mbele, najua mwanga wanilinda. Nasonga, sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama. Sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama. Nasonga mbele, 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 mbele. Kimbia, wasikudanganye, saa yako imepitia. Shikilia hadithi ya ushindi yako, watu hawajasikia. Najua unapambana ingawa upinzani mekushika mkononi, bado moyo wako warudia. Nasonga mbele hata giza kinitesa. Nasonga mbele, najua mwanga wanilinda. Nasonga, sitakubali kuzama. Nina nguvu ya kugharama. Nasonga mbele, wajua nasikia siku za usoni wakitaja
Hi, welcome this afternoon, and thank you for making the time to join us again in this continuing series and these conversations that are designed to empower us to understand our NSP and to engage with it. My name is Upingi Mgobozi, and I have followed and engaged with the process since we started. With me today is Kwezi Lomso. Kwezi, are you there?
Hi, I am here.
Kwezi?
Hello.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
Thank you for the people that have joined us. Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you, Kwezi. Thank you for the people that have joined us. It's been an insightful 10 weeks, and we are getting close to wrapping it up now and engage with the going forward. The purpose for today is very simple, is to say in the past 10 weeks, we have been learning, we've been empowered, we've had different specialists joining us and sharing and empowering us. So today, it's really a day for listening and saying, what are the questions we have, especially us people that are on the ground? How now that we understand much more about the NSP, what are the things that we still feel needs to be looked at? What are the things that we think we want to input in shaping it to be our NSP? We've looked at the legal framework. We have been empowered. We had Spongile and Welekazi taking us through a process of how the law is made. And Kwezi, I must tell you, I learned a lot that week. Just to understand the processes that go into making the laws that shape and that govern us, and that help us to ensure that there's accountability, from all sides. So Kwezi will take us through what were the red flags in the current version of the accountability mechanisms that have been put in place. What are the things that we need to engage with further? We went and we looked at the council, and the team has engaged extensively around this envisaged council and how it would look like and how it will serve us. And I'm really hoping that we will be getting more input today in how we see it being shaped and taking us forward in fighting the gender-based violence and femicide that we are experiencing in our country. After that, all this needs money. All this has got to be funded. All this has got to be, and these funds have got to be accounted for, and these funds have got to do what they are intended. So I learned so much, and I am hoping I was not the only one who just took so much from the lessons around feminist funds. We learned from what has happened in other countries, and what does it then mean for us. Kwezi, we need to say today, now that we've been taken through and we understand the process and the time it requires to set up these funds, what does it really mean for South Africa? What are the things that are really important to us and in our context? And for us to ensure that the funds reach the people that it's intended for. I mean, I come from KwaZulu-Natal. I'm very keen on understanding that an NGO that is sitting in Guavuma, is sitting at Opo, how will it access these funds? And we need to use this platform to ask those questions and shape that fund. So I look forward to the questions that have been gathered up to now, the red flags that we've already identified, and I'm hoping more questions will be coming up Kwezi, can I now hand over to you to take us through just a summary of some of these red flags that have been raised, and we really allocate more time to listening and gathering what other people think. Thank you. Over to you, Kwezi.
Thank you so much, Pinky.
Kwezi Lomso.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. And can you see my screen?
Yes, so you can see your screen.
All right, so I think what I'll do is I'll switch off the video so that I can be able to control the screen. Yeah, I'm a little bit flustered today. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kwezi, and welcome to our session. And thank you so much to Pinky for moderating for us today. It's really great to have her on board. And thank you to everyone who is attending. And I can see that the numbers are increasing. Welcoming everyone who's also on Facebook and all of our platforms. So I am going to make kind of a short-ish presentation, but as Pinky said, today we really would like to hear a lot from you. So we are encouraging people to kind of state in the questions that they'd like to speak, as a way to put their hands up or to raise their hands. After which we will point to you, and if you can unmute and give your input. So that's really, we really do want to be able to have a conversation today. Those who prefer to type, that's fine. But we want to be able to hear you and to hear your voices. So just quickly, for today's session, as Pinky has gone through the last couple of sessions and what we were doing there, the sessions 11 and 12 are really about consolidating this information. So today is about saying, we've been talking for 10 weeks, and over the 10 weeks, you, our audience, our listeners, our co-collaborators, our co-creators have been sending in questions, concerns as it relates to how this NSP should be implemented, will be implemented, can be implemented. So in our discussions, there've been quite a lot of what we're calling the red flags, some of the key issues that we have been listening in on and collating. And so today we are going to present some of what you have been saying as the issues, as the red flags. And on next week, we have secured a conversation with the Department of Women. And so what we will then do next week is to present that to them. So today we'll present what you've been saying and give space to then add onto that, add onto some of the issues that we need them to take into account, and add recommendations as to how we think these issues must be taken into account. So we need to raise our issues, and we need to put up some recommendations or some ideas, so that when we're in conversation with them next week, we can say, why did you choose to implement X in this way and not in this way? Why did you choose to go against what the NSP says here instead of doing X, Y, and Z? That's really how we have prepared for sessions 11 and 12, with 12 being this conversation with the Department of Women. So today we're going to do a really brief overview of these institutional and operational arrangements that we're talking about. We've had numerous sessions that have gone in depth into these, and so we can always go back to those videos and to go back to those slides to familiarize ourselves a bit more with all of that, with those. Then I'm going to present to you the key issues, as I said, which we're calling the red flags for consideration in the establishment of the institutional arrangements. Then it's over to you. Then we discuss, are there any additional flags you want to raise? And what are the recommendations? So that's what we want to do today. And before we kind of go there, so part of just a brief reminder of some of the things that have brought us even into this 12-week webinar series. I mean, we had planned a popular education space for the NSP as the Call to Action Collective. However, there were a couple of events that then led us into kind of intensifying that, right? So you will remember that a group of organizations sent a letter to the ministry on the 4th of June after we had gotten communication about giving like appointments to the council. So we were sent communication about a meeting that was going to happen, and we were sent communication to say, how can we add to the criteria in terms of appointments to the council, and names that need to go on the council. And we responded, on the 4th of June with a letter to the department to ask for a couple of things, to say the interim steering committee is no longer in place, and we would like to know how the department is intending on transitioning between the interim steering committee and the bodies as envisaged in the NSP, in the implementation of the NSP. We would like the process to be followed as is envisaged in the NSP. So we would like to know what's going on with the legislative framework that the Department of Justice is tasked with drafting, and that has to go into lawmaking processes and has to govern this council. And what is the schedule, right? So that's kind of in brief what our letter was asking for. Quite recently, on the 14th of September, so a few days ago, we received a response from that letter, and we're really grateful for the response. We received a response from the ministry from that letter, stating some of the things that they are prioritizing and inviting us to a webinar on the 23rd of September. So maybe some of my colleagues, once we get into the discussion phase, can kind of speak a bit more about these two pieces of communication and what they mean in a broader sense. So as we know, the council, the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, derives its mandate from the Constitution, international and regional instruments, cabinet instruction, and the Presidential Summit on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide of 2018. Its purpose is to amplify the national response across the 6 pillars of the GBV NSP. In addition, the Department of Justice is tasked with creating legislation to coordinate this body. This council will set a national agenda on GBVF issues. Short-term priorities are over 3 years, medium-term are 5 years, and for longer-term priorities. So as we've said, the DOJ is tasked with creating legislation to coordinate, and the council is tasked with the development of a GBVF fund. Ooh, what did I do with my slides? So some of the components that have been gone through in previous webinars, so I won't go through them in detail, is an inter-ministerial committee, the technical team, the National Council, and the Board of Directors, which consists of a 13-member executive board, 6 government and several civil society representatives. So there's a proposed nomination and appointments, nominations, institutions, CSOs, NGOs, social movements, and letters to these institutions will be placed on the website. The notice will also be placed on national newspapers and be accompanied by a communication drive. The response is that the nomination form is to be signed by the nominee, and a statement by the nominator attesting to the suitability of the nominee and a comprehensive CV of the nominee. Then there is a recommendation panel. let's just go through the panel a little bit. So that is, we'll set up the IMC will set up the recommendation panel comprising of government and GBVF experts. This panel will take into consideration the qualifying criteria and geographic representativity. So we know that we received an updated set of TORs with the letter that the minister had sent, and we just need to have a look at what those TORs say, what the update looks like. So some of the issues that you have been raising across the sessions around the setting up of these things include, so the process of establishing the Council on Gender-Based Violence consists of 13-member executive board made up of 6 government and 7 civil society representatives. The board nominates the co-chairpersons representing government and civil society. An issue that has been raised is that there is no transparency on criteria for civil society and government eligibility. There's also no clarity on how civil society membership will be finalized. In addition, there's no guidance on how civil society will be supported in the council by other sectors. There's no clarity on cross-jurisdiction interaction. That means that how will the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and regional working groups interact to ensure information sharing, as mentioned in Chapter 5 of the NSP. And the council is set to meet the president once a year. A higher frequency of meetings with the IMC structure should take place. In addition, there's some red flags that were raised from the TOR for the appointment of the members. Civil society is acknowledged as a crucial actor, and are encouraged to provide meaningful engagement on the TOR and selection criteria, but this TOR does not outline a process to facilitate civil society consultations. There are no measures in place to ensure CSO individuals with diverse expertise and institutional memory relating to the gender-based violence and femicide struggle, and it doesn't impose varied level government or departmental membership. There is further clarity on the technical task teams in terms of civil society representation that is needed. The board of directors should include in its implementation plans and priorities the categories included in the NSP: budget allocation, budget source, indicators, and means of verification. Another flag has been raised around diversity and inclusion. So the women of South Africa should be given an opportunity to see who is in those meetings and give their input. But the establishment process does not address the need for diverse and accessible community representation. Is no engagement with approaches and methods that have been established for marginalized geographic and demographic CSOs without technical privileges. Legislative framework is supposed to guide the establishment of the council, but the legislation has not gone out for public participation and has not been passed by Parliament. This contradicts the GBV declaration. And some stuff around communication. The GBVF website doesn't share the outcomes of the interministerial committee meetings, which prevents meaningful civil society engagement and advocacy. Website is not user-friendly for the downloading of communication information. There's no detail on how the fund will be established and set up. We know that SABCOHA was chosen to administer the fund without a transparent appointment process. Again, in terms of communication, there's no media campaign or communication strategy that includes regular statistics on GBVF to inform and raise awareness and influence behavior change. And this was agreed in December 2019. Prof. Rashida had also raised a flag that I decided to add here, the certain patterns of conduct from the powers that be, including political patronage, reward system, political appeasement on issues that disproportionately affect women, perceptions of ownership of the women's agenda, minimal understanding of a nonpartisan approach, historical mistrusts and tensions, and rhetoric versus reality. So those are some of the issues that we have collated from the different areas where we are engaging and from the different presentations. And now the opportunity is for us to then discuss, right? And we want to start this by saying, what are some of the additional issues or red flags that people want to raise as it relates to how the legislative framework process is going or is not going, the establishment of the council and the establishment of the fund. And then we want to talk about some of the recommendations. So I'm going to open the space through Binky's facilitation for us to then go into that conversation.
Thank you, Crazy. To structure how we get into those into that conversation, Crazy. Should we look at specific questions, or should we just open the floor? So I think just look at specific questions, questions around the governance structure. Currently, the proposed is 13 members in the council. It constitutes 13 members. One of the questions we need to engage with as civil society is, should civil society be members of the council? What will be the impact of civil society being members of the impact in what will be the impact of us being member of the council to exercising the role of oversight, the role of critiquing government really when it is necessary. Should civil society act as experts that are advising, as the people that are engaging with the GBF, GBVF on a daily basis, as people who are engaging with the research in these topics? What are the views of the role that civil society should be playing in that council? Should the governance be divided into advisory board, or should it just be one council body? Should there be advisory boards and a separate fund manager? Taking into account the differences in our ability to even apply for funding, you find that there are smaller organizations that would struggle to process and be ready to meet certain criteria to access funds. Should then be a dedicated fund management capability, and what would it look like by the GBVF secretariat, or will this be seen as a totally different entity? Should it be outsourced? Should it be? How do we make sure that this fund advances the feminist agenda that we want to drive? So I'm just going to invite people to indicate by raising your hand if you would like to contribute into this conversation. Yes.
We have a hand from Lefahonolo Mutlong. I hope I'm saying that properly. And please just unmute and go for it.
Sorry for that, it's a mistake, man.
Lefahonolo, do you have a question? Would you like to to share your views on the governance structure questions that are on the table at the moment?
I think you said it was a mistake, Pinky. So there's a comment here from Kitumetse. Kitumetse, do you want to unmute?
There's a second.
And share.
Can I go through? Can I proceed?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Kwesi, so much for the presentation. It is so informative. I think for me, my biggest concern about the governance or how the council is going to be structured is that there seems to be no clear strategy on how we link this council to people who are working in the sector on a daily basis, right? So I think that's, for me, one of the biggest things missing. I also think we need clear criteria, right? I do think that we need the civil society present in this council, and maybe it's only when we have criteria we'll be able to determine the kind of roles civil society should play. I think, almost defining roles now is a bit hard without understanding the criteria, but my most pressing matter is the link between the council and ordinary NGOs, NPOs, civil society, private sector, government, etc., etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's actually an important one, especially if civil society is not part of the council. How does it then, engage with the council? I see Monica also has got their hand up. Monica, could you please unmute and reflect? Monica?
Hi.
Monica, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Monica.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I was also going to add on the governance structure, because it's a little bit of a dicey situation when it comes to secretariat, the civil society not being part of it. So maybe that needs to be, engaged and be tapped to in more and more conversations, because that will be such a situation. I was in one of the sectors of women's sector with the health department, so it was just a mess. It needs to be collaborated and function be well structured. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica.
Let me just see any. I just want to see if there are any more questions before I give you the opportunity to come back, Kwesi. I think Francesca has got a question or a comment. Francesca, can you please unmute yourself and we hear from you.
So much. Pinky, I actually would like to make you aware of something. I serve on the intersectoral committee with regards to the legislation aspect of everything. And I want you to be aware that everything with regards to moving forward with the GBVF plan is multisectoral. So we in the ISC has got to marry and align the National Preventative Strategy with the Summit Declaration, with the NSP Response Plan, with the National Preventative Strategy that is still in creation. So it is not going to be an overnight process. And my opinion is that civil society should be advisory, because I've seen things being delayed that could have been sped up faster had we not had to deal with the civil aspect, because sometimes things happen behind the scenes which is already very advantageous, and then when there is a public outcry, it could make us stop and go through a new process and then continue what we initiated in the first place, which was the correct procedure. However, I would like to say, you know, what we really need to communicate with the general public and civil society better. Media involvement is crucial. That is what I want to add. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, communication is key. Communication is key. And I think Kwezi, in all the communication that has and engagements with saints, we really need to emphasize the importance of not rushing and of not communicating. So I really agree with that. Kwezi, can I hand over to you? And then Lorna, I have noted you. After I've allowed Kwezi to come in, I will give you the opportunity to also come in. Thank you.
So thanks, Pinky. I mean, I'm liking the space where, you know, people are sharing. I'm just sharing some of the questions, right, as well, on the screen. And these are the things that we are collating that we will, in addition, then present to the Department of Women. But I think this question of timing is also quite important for us to grapple with. I think our last speaker spoke about how the process is not an overnight one. And I think as the Call to Action Collective, this has been one of our key contestations that the NSP provides for the council to be set up guided by a legislative framework. When this was being put together, we know how laws take, like we know the amount of time that laws take to put in. So this idea now that we need to do things differently because it's going to take long is going against what is said in the NSP. And maybe if some of the other colleagues can kind of try and engage this question of, this question of timing more substantively, I'd really appreciate that. Yeah, so I think let's listen to others. I will just keep putting these questions up on the screen so that maybe they can guide us. There's questions around, and these are questions that will be on a Google form that we will send around. You can please add to the questions, or you can also start putting in recommendations that we can then take to the Department of Women. So how should we address some of the learning gaps regarding the NSP? What are some of the ideas around that? How does the NSP work link to concurrent work being done? I think that's part of Gidumetzi's question. How can civil society be mobilized towards implementing an NSP? How can we ensure that there is CSO and community representation in all decision making? So yeah, let's maybe keep our comments coming in. I think Lorna is next. I'll give over to you again, Pinky.
Yeah, Lorna, thank you, Kwezi. Lorna, please can you unmute yourself and we allow you to come in here. Lorna, can you hear us? I think Lorna is having a problem there. Daniela, you had a question or you would like to put some input. Please can you unmute yourself and we hear from you. I think Lorna had a problem. And Lorna, if you want to come in again, please can you give us an indication by raising your hand? Daniela, I hand over to you. Daniela?
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute myself. This same might have happened to Lorna. Thank you so much for the space and for the opportunity to input. I just want to raise a couple of questions. I'm not completely au fait with things because unfortunately I've been so overburdened, so I haven't been able to be at all the seminars. But I have a concern when you talk about CSOs being part of an advisory structure and having an advisory role versus the council itself. My question is, what is the where do decision-making powers lie? So normally an advisory body is not a decision-making body, and I would be concerned if CSOs were only in a body that was not in the decision-making space. And I think that might have been, it was my understanding that that might have been one of the reasons why there was the provision for 51% CSO representation on the council, because of, you know, the history of government domination in these kinds of spaces. So that's one question. The other question is, how does one, I mean, what systems would be in place to ensure alignment between, for example, the provincial NSPs or the PSPs and the plans and the structures and the communications between them? Because I think that is also really crucial, that the gap between what is discussed, what is on the agenda and decision-making process at a national level, that they, and then cascading all the way down and then all the way back up again, because there seems to be a need to ensure that, I mean, I can understand that it would be very difficult for ground level activist organizations and so on to be represented at NSP level, but how does one ensure the voice is carried up, and that there is enough space at all these other levels? And I don't know whether that is something that can be legislated or it's more around operating procedures and so on, but it is a concern that I'm sitting with. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Daniela. And you know that I agree with you with the question of the whole intergovernmental flow of communication from national right down to the local government. But it also raises a question that we need to look at as civil society, that how does information flow down and up within the different civil societies, those that are based in the outmost rural areas and those that are representing at the level of the NSP and all that. So these are the conversations we need to have, and hopefully start to have a way forward. Kwezi, should I hand over to you? Lorna, was Lorna able to come back? Let's see, Lorna. No, I think we've still lost Lorna. Are there any other questions that are coming through from the Facebook page? Any other inputs that we would like to register for consideration? Kwezi, anything from your side? Kwezi? I don't seem to be getting through to Kwezi Lomso, but please do indicate once you are connected. Maybe we should continue and look for and see if are there any more inputs from the team. Okay. Team, can we move on to the next slide? Okay. we seem to be having a little bit of a technical glitch happening there. Kay, is there anyone that can help me? We move forward, please.
Hi, sorry, Pinky. What do we need?
So I was suggesting that because we don't seem to have any more inputs coming through on the collaboration, and we've noted what has come through, maybe we look at more questions, and if there are questions that are coming through our Facebook page, that maybe we use this opportunity to share those questions.
Sure. I mean, I think we can also share so I don't know if Lorna has spoken. I know that Daniela has spoken, but what about Deline Clark, whose hand was also up? I just wanted to note those hands. And if they can unmute and maybe share.
Sure. I didn't note Deline. You just see here. Deline? I don't see her hand. Oh, now it's up. Okay. Deline, sorry if I missed your hand. Please do go ahead, and the floor is yours.
Hi, sorry, my hand wasn't up. I just clicked on it now to put it down, so I wasn't raising a question.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Deline. I think Michaela Moodley. I'm sorry, I if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Is your hand up? My colleagues are telling me that to note Michaela Moodley, if you'd like to go in and speak. Please unmute. Okay. I've unmuted you.
Hi there.
Hi.
Not sure if you guys can hear me. So I'm not really an expert on all these things, but what I was thinking to sort of address the gap between sort of ground workers and representation in the council was sort of forming an NGO union in a sense, sort of in the way teachers and mine workers have unions to represent them when it comes to rights being violated or just regarding representation in council. Would it work to have sort of NGO unions where maybe people who've had a lot of experience in gender-based violence, reformation or trying to change structures, if they could perhaps maybe be like hitting those things up and then form representatives in the council to help in decision making, not just in an advisory sense. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Michaela. I'm also, if there's anyone else whose hand is up, please do indicate, even if it's on the chat, that you'd like to speak. I'll just share some of the questions as well that we are receiving for everyone else to hear. We're collating all of these into our kind of section on the issues that we're raising. There's a question here, since there are all of the outstanding aspects relating to public and parliamentary processes, how should civil society engage to ensure that these processes are upheld? A second one is, why is the nominations process described for civil society, but not for government appointed? Surely all the members should be appointed using the same criteria. And some would even argue that a higher criteria for public servants. Another question is, why are there now two boards and a council described, an executive board of trustees and a GBVF council? And these are all questions that are coming through from WhatsApp. Some of this clarity, I will ask one of my colleagues if she could please unmute as well and just describe it again, because I may bite my tongue a little bit on this. So, Spongile, if you can, this question around why are the two boards and a council described? An executive board, a board of trustees, and a council. That would be great. And then
Kwezi, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Can you?
Yes.
Okay. The good thing is the Department of Women, the people who are leading these processes, have availed themselves for the next webinar, the last one, next Wednesday, the 23rd. So we will be able to have answers to some of the questions that we have. In the beginning, Kwezi noted that we finally received a response from the department. And one of the things is we do have Chapter 5 of the National Strategic Plan, the one that we have been working with that sets up these operational and institutional arrangements. There seems to have been a sense that whatever it is that is in the National Strategic Plan is going to delay the process. So there is this kind of rush or urgency in bringing about the council. And so this board of trustees or these TORs that were shared early this week by the department, it's trying to set up a temporary structure while waiting for the legislative framework that is going to set up the council as mandated in the National Strategic Plan. And that's the reason why we have multiple structures now that we are talking about. So I do think that part of the question is whether this thing actually makes sense to set up a board of trustees and all of these things while we are waiting for a council. And that's part of the red flag. It's like, is the agency, is there a very big push? And if there's a big push to put an interim structure, it's what does it look like? Or so that's where we are. That's part of I don't know, Jessica, if that answers your question, but that's the reason why we now have got all of these other structures coming up. Was there anything else, Kwezi, that you wanted me to respond to?
Not at the moment, but I will definitely call on you. I think the idea is that some of these clarifications are adding to the flags that have already been raised. And there are some recommendations that are coming through in terms of what then we communicate to the department. So I know that there's a recommendation that has just come through from Facebook, a suggestion of mobilizing civil society towards NSP implementation, suggesting working groups and each of the pillars to push particular items to feed into the council, similar to what is being done through the webinar series. And I think there's stuff that is happening in terms of work on the pillars, but again, there needs to be a clarity. I think, as Bongela had mentioned, about how that fits into the NSP in terms of how it's governed, what the expectations are, what the terms of reference are, and maybe that's some of the clarity we will get next week. I don't know, Pinky, if there's any more questions you are noting or anyone else who would like to speak. We have about 10 minutes left of our session.
I think we need to just highlight, Kwezi, that even after the session, people can still raise questions. They can still email through. They can still use the Facebook platform. They can still use the WhatsApp line. So should there be more questions that the person thinks about in preparation for next week, because we really need to maximize the opportunity of raising these questions in the concerns with the department next week. Maybe I should use this opportunity then, Kwezi, to say what is next. You know, maybe we present through the process as we see it, leading to next week's session and after next week, and how we get ourselves ready to engage with the process. I'm not sure if we accept.
I seem to have lost your sound.
For some reason, hi guys.
Kwezi, are you still there?
Hi, Lorna. Please go ahead.
Hi. It seems like I've been unmuted and Kwezi's been muted. Sorry about that. I don't know how that happens. But anyway, I just wanted to say I absolutely agree what's been said about civil society. Civil society needs to play a really important role in the council, but we also need mechanisms and selection criteria to make sure that all the different groups of women are represented, because quite often we have the stronger NGOs.
Hi, Lorna, we've lost you.
We seem to be losing Lorna. Lorna, are you still with us? We're so interested in hearing what she has to say, but I think we keep losing her. Let's give it a try again. Lorna, you
being represented, and then the weaker.
I think Lorna's line is failing her. Lorna, can I request that maybe you send through the input either in the chat messages or in any of the other platforms, because you seem to be getting cut, and we seem to keep losing you there. Kwezi, can I hand over to you as we prepare to wrap up?
Sure thing. I mean, I think another interesting question that that's the one that maybe I'll use in trying to wrap up for today. And a very interesting question that has come through is the kind of that we don't necessarily need, what's the word now? That civil society representation is important, but what is also crucial is what civil society and other parties do once they're in the council, and what is the criteria for representation, and what are the accountability mechanisms for then reporting back into different constituencies, and how those things should and need to be, what's the word? Should and need to be put together. So that's one of the questions that has come through. And as we had said, you know, we were reminding people that we will send through a Google form and our why am I losing my words? We'll send through our Google form, and in some of our other communication means, our email, our WhatsApp, our Facebook page, where we can continue to raise the flags and continue to talk through some of the issues. But I do want us, I mean, before we wrap up, to use the kind of last 20 minutes. I've just been alerted again, and I'm sorry about that. That we haven't spoken about two quite critical elements. And so we want to hear issues that people want to raise around the setting up of the Gender-Based Violence Fund. We spoke about the fund in the previous webinars, that there needs to be a fund that is set up, but that also has no clarity in terms of what is its terms of reference, what kind of fund, and there's a few questions that you know, are in the Google form that we will send that are directly related to the setting up of this fund. So who should it be accountable to? Who should fund the fund? Should it be a basket fund, etc.? So maybe to open some space to talk about how the GBV fund, some of the flags we want to raise around the GBV fund specifically, and some of the recommendations that people want to raise for the GBV fund that we can then take into next week and into processes that come after. So if we can open up a round for that. Now we want to hear about money.
Okay. Can I please come in?
Yes, Mongile, please do come in.
Yes. So I think one of the biggest things to kind of take away, you know, from this is that there are three big questions that we need to be able to answer. The first one being the question about the legislative framework, whether as civil society we are happy to proceed with this interim mechanism that is being put in place, right? Because once the call for nominations kind of go out, whether the criteria for civil society representation on this interim council that's being put up is sufficient is what we need to. And so some of the questions or the recommendations is that in this interim one, are the things that we want to see in the bigger council, well, not bigger, but the council that will be set up as mandated by the National Strategic Plan. What are we losing and what are we gaining by putting in place an interim council? Because we have to be able to say whether the issue is so urgent that we are going to have an interim structure put in place, or whether it makes sense to wait for the one that has been set up by a legislative framework. In our conversations over the past few weeks about why we think a legislative framework is important, it's about it playing one of the important things in kind of a constitutional democracy around what accountability actually means, so that when things that are supposed to happen do not happen, who is held accountable? And that is important also in terms of just providing clarity on oversight. Whatever the answer is on whether we go with this interim council that the Department of Women is proposing, or whether we wait for the legislative framework that Department of Justice is supposed to develop, what are the core components of the council that we want to be able to see? And I think today we have spent a lot of time talking about the representation of civil society in the council, but we shouldn't be limiting ourselves, you know, as civil society, to a conversation about the representation. What the council does, the functions of the council, it's also a very important thing, because what we have seen from the terms of reference that we shared in June is that there are quite a number of things that are not as set out in the NSP. So for example, the interministerial committee, they sit there as a structure, but there's also representation of government in the council. What is not clear is who are these people and how they are going to be selected. So the criteria for eligibility to sit on the council is being defined for civil society, but not necessarily for government, right? Then there are all of these things about what it is that the council is coming to do. Because when we have legislation, those are questions that will have to be answered. But in this interim structure, that's also not clear. So what's being pushed, it's a governing body, but not necessarily the functions of what this governing body is going to do in a very, very clear way, and how this accountability is going to happen. So there's an answer that we need to come up with when this happens and how this happens. I know that the letter that was circulated on Tuesday from the minister is that the minister wants to have another webinar to be able to engage. But I think going into that process, these are some of the things that we need to take with us. Then the question about the content of the legislative framework, it's about the NSP says the legislative framework needs to regulate the functions or the council. But from the recommendations that we have been getting over the past few weeks is that it does not make sense to just look at the council when you have all of these things that are part of the institutional and operational framework. You can't have legislation that just looks at one part, because all of these other things are there for a reason. So if we want to establish an accountability framework, then the legislative framework needs to be able to connect so that we do not go back to this fragmentation that we have talked about. So that's something else that we will need to be able to talk about, because also, as we talk about this interim thing that's been proposed, it's about how does it make sure that there is effective and efficient coordination of this structure, so that you don't have an interim thing that's not even in the NSP that is working outside of what Chapter 5 of the NSP is talking about. The third thing that we need to talk about is the issue of the fund. Week 9 and 10, we had different people coming to talk about different funding mechanisms. There is just a sentence in the NSP that talks about this fund. And from the TORs, we have seen that the fund is limited to responding to emergencies. And now this cannot be if we want to be able to talk about a funding mechanism. The questions that we were left with by the people who talked to us about funding mechanisms included the types of things that would be funded, the composition of the fund, the sources of funding, the structure itself, the type of advocacy that the fund itself will be engaged in. So these are questions, and the recommendations have come from there that we hope to be able to put together and then share this with the Department of Justice and also Department of Women, because when we move forward, what is important is that we actually move together. So hopefully, in the past 10 weeks, what we have been able to do with these webinars has been to say that if we just move for the purposes of moving without necessarily considering why it is important to have a legislative framework, why it is important to talk about the functions of the council and the composition, and how it links to the summit declaration of the 24 demands and all other demands that have been made around leadership, accountability, coordination, that when we put a council in place, it is not only fit for purpose, but it actually responds to the questions that have been asked for the past decade about how do we put in place a national strategic plan that is able to work and that is fit for purpose. So the questions that we are asking of this interim structure is whether it is consistent or it aligns with the key demands that have come from all of these processes that we have engaged in. And not only these processes, and I think when Professor Manju was talking to us, I think in week 5, it was an analysis of the other things that have gone wrong in the various mechanisms that we have tried to set up. So part of the red flags and the key learnings there have been about how do we not repeat the mistakes, of the past? How do we ensure that we guard against political patronage becoming something that comes to destroy? So how do we build something that is able to withstand corruption, incompetence, political deployment, and patronage, so that we have a structure that is fit for purpose? So as we close next week, and these questions that Kwesi and Pinky are going to talk to us about, those are the key things that we would like to hear from you about. What are the recommendations that make sure? It's nothing to set up a council in this country. We have set up a number of councils. We have seen them fail in various ways. But what we are saying is, how do we build one that's not only fit for purpose, but that can withstand all of these social ills that militate against the functioning of the mechanisms, that we need to be able to have. So these are key kind of demands that we need to be able to make so that when we move forward, we move with greater clarity. I mean, an example is right now, a number of people, very well-intentioned, are participating in working groups. If you think about the working groups around the pillars, these working groups are nowhere in the National Strategic Plan. So what is important to think about is, what does it mean to have a National Strategic Plan in April? And then the things that comes out of this are things that are not in the National Strategic Plan. We have working groups that are functioning, but it's not clear what the terms of reference are. They are not in the National Strategic Plan. Now there is a proposed governing council, board of trustees, that is not in the National Strategic Plan. So what does it mean to have a plan and consistently work outside of the plan? So these are the questions that we need to answer. So I'll just take it back to you, Kwesi and Pinky.
Thank you. Thank you, Sibongile. Yeah, big questions. And I see in the comments as well, some people are reflecting how much they've actually lost confidence in these interim structures. And these are the matters that we need to bring to the department to say, as Sibongile says, how is this council done differently in a manner that is going to serve the intended purpose. Francesca, are you back? Is your sound sorted? Francesca? I see Francesca's hand is still up, and I'm not sure. She was having a problem with her sound. Let me see if I'm able to unmute her. Francesca, yes. Are you there? Okay. I'll hand over to you. I'm not sure. She seems to be muted again. Francesca, can you unmute yourself, please? There's another question that has come through here. Will the process be about the process that needs to happen, or rigorously action for change with civil society as a major role player? What will the power relations be between the different role players. And I think it talks to it talks to everything that we've been talking about this afternoon, saying how is it coordinated? Who's got the authority to make what decision, and how do we see coming together? And what would be helpful as well is to use the opportunity to make recommendations. That it is our NSP. How do we see these things coming through, and we're able to then influence what transpires and what it becomes really at the end of the day. Francesca, are you back? I wouldn't really want to have anyone that we have left behind without giving them an opportunity to talk, but I see that she keeps having a problem, and I'm not sure if she can hear us. Okay, in the absence of more questions, Sibongile, are you still with us? Can I invite you back? Just for us to really wrap up, and we do once again would like to stress that people can still send through the questions, and not just questions as well, recommendations as well, that we need to table to government as this process unfolds. Because if we do not get it right now as we set up, and we think we're then going to fix problems later, we might end up with muted by the organizer. Okay, Francesca, I will try and unmute you. You are able to unmute yourself, but let me try and unmute you. Francesca, are you okay now?
Thank you.
You have been unmuted.
I can hear you. I just want to comment with regards to the fund. I think we need to define the terms of reference very well. The terms of reference need to discern between institutional, administrative, executive, and legislative functions. That is the only way that such a multi-level organization or a body will be able to actually come up with specific focus areas. Focus areas are necessary because if you set up a fund, you cannot fund everything. So there will have to be focus areas. Funds are normally administered by professional fund managers. So I would like to see that we have a PPP fund manager situation as well. And then I just want to add, with regards to what Sibongile has said, my goodness, that was really a mouthful. When she said, what would the function of the body be? I just want to add that ultimately, legislative matters will always be vested in Department of Justice. So that is why I said the TORs needs to be defined very clearly, because you cannot have a body prescribed to the judicial and the legislative processes. There are certain criteria, there are certain aspects that are at work that needs to be upheld at all times to ensure the best processes for every South African citizen. So that is what I would like to have added. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Francesca, for that. And I think these are the important inputs that we need to make sure that they make their way through to the recommendations from and the questions by civil society. I'm just going to run through here just to be sure that there are other important questions that I could have missed, and I'm going to invite the team, anyone from the team, that might have picked up a question that we haven't raised, as we are engaging through different platforms, and I might not necessarily have visibility of everything. Anybody else from the team that has got something that we have missed, please do indicate to me.
Okay, good. Right. Sorry, I just need to step in. Our colleague Kwezi has had an emergency, so she's not able to. So that's how I'm kind of coming back, like more than once. So ours is to let you know the process. So next week on Wednesday, it's the last. So remember, the 24th is a public holiday, so you need to get your Jerusalem group on. But on Wednesday, we are going to close, and we are thankful that the Department of Women is going to be able to send a representative. And what we are trying to do is to answer the question, what does it mean to move together? What does it mean to work together? And so that we are able to go together. There are issues where we will have to agree, and but I do think that more than anything else, it's just that we have to find a way to work together. We have to find a way to find each other. There's been a lot of questions that have been asked. These are questions that are very valid. What we are going to try and do as call to action in wrapping up this process is we have been putting together all of these questions from the beginning of the webinars, and we are going to try and group them in such a way that it's quite clear where the concerns are sitting. And we would like to be able to share these as questions, as recommendations, as red flags with both departments, so that whatever next steps are going there, is going to be are going to do that. I am very thankful that over the past few weeks, we have had people, working for the Law Reform Commission or the Department of Justice who have been participating in these webinars, and also just people who have got different sets of skill set coming here, and people writing to the call to action email and the WhatsApp, basically offering to provide assistance. We do need that. We do need to have many people with different skills actually coming together, because I do think what we all have in common is the ambition or the desire to want to end violence against women. It's a big task, but it is also a task that is sitting with everyone. It's not something that can just be left to astronauts, like going to the moon, because we all, in our various ways, can play our small part. Right now, there are a number of people who are working on the pieces of legislation that are before Parliament, and that's a process that we completely support. And we want to be able to contribute to all the various civil society efforts. But right now, what call to action is looking at is really making sure that Chapter 5 of the National Strategic Plan, the institutional and operational arrangements, do not run away from us at this stage. So we welcome your comments. We are going to send a Google Doc. Basically, it's a survey. It's a very short survey, but we are really interested in finding out how you would like us to proceed in terms of the ask to make in the legislative framework, the scope, the content. The same goes for the council as well as the fund. And then these will be the things that will be collated. And so please do participate in this process. And we do appreciate the time that you have made yourselves available over the past 11 weeks. It feels like 11 years. So thank you very much. I don't know if there are other kind of questions or anything before we close for this week.
There are no questions Sibongile on the dashboard on my side. Let me just one more time run to see if are there any hands. Francisca, I'm not sure if your hand was up before you spoke or it is up for the second time before I hand over to Sibongile to wrap up and close. Francisca? Okay, I think her hand was up before she actually had the opportunity to talk. I'd like to also take the time to thank the organizers and to also thank the people that have taken the time, the team that has taken the time to join today, and to stress what has already been said, to say, let's shape this, let's send through the suggestions, and let us walk the journey together. Sibongile, I will hand over to you at this point to wrap up and close for us. Thank you.
You are appreciated, so thank you very much for all the time. Have a wonderful week ahead. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you. I think that is where we ended for this week. And from our side, thank you very much.